The idea of contrast is very central, I think, to most art, and it has many different aspects of it. Most people, when you say contrast, I think light and dark and how much difference there is in a given area or over an entire image. But it's really a lot. It's much wider than that. Um, here are some opposites just off the top of my head. There are countless different ways, and um, the more you can come up with, the better, and consciously trying to play up differences. So really, when you're drawing or painting something, you are telling the viewer this is different than that. It feels different. It is different. It's harder here. It's softer there. It's warmer here. It's cooler there. Um, Say, for instance, in a drawing, how you would draw a hard knee as opposed to hair. Everyone's very soft. Do you want to accurately show the difference between those? No, you want to exaggerate that a little bit. The idea of caricature is taking somebody's features and showing where they depart from the norm and exaggerating those differences to a greater or lesser extent. But even very realistic drawing and portraiture has a strong element of caricature to it and simplification. And the one aspect of simplification that works very well is it allows these differences to be made clear. So let's just paint something here and see if we can figure out or use some of these ideas. So if I paint a bunch of shapes here, well, that's fairly boring. What I see here is a repetition. This and that all have the same radius. The radius is repeated here and there and there. But if we were to work subtractively and get rid of some of those, immediately we've hidden obviously what the first mark was made from. Now here I've got a large area to more detail here, big mast or a detail area here. That's good, but what I see is this is now too similar in shape to that. Now this has the same edge everywhere, so maybe I want to soften just a few of them. This is a middle value. Maybe I want to do something that is darker, change the hue, and paint something over the top. Over here, now I've kind of divided this into two areas. So now I've got dark and light. Oh, that's not as interesting as it could be. So really, I'm thinking about basic design ideas and how they apply to making marks on a paper. I'm not really attempting to paint anything, but I really am, let's see, I want to reselect that. I am doing what some abstract painters do for a living, and that is keep the eye entertained with contrast of different marks in different shapes so that nothing is repeated. The only time I see repetition is the big counterbalance to contrast as a design element. And if you look at an elevation drawing, of a building, you'll see that all the windows are exactly alike. But maybe this is contrast in and of itself, where we have repetition versus randomness. So maybe that works just as well. Because and when you ever wonder why landscaping looks so good with buildings, is because you have all these very hard-edged rectilinear shapes and then something that is very free form around it. And buildings benefit tremendously from having landscaping around them, I think, because of this very basic design principle. So right now we basically just have dark and light, not much interesting color. And it's also creating layering, where you don't know what's on top of what. You don't know what was done first. Yeah, maybe if we were to small shapes. So now we have much higher frequency noise is counterbalanced to these larger masses. Maybe we could then bring some of that back in. Now this is all looking kind of monotonous in terms of its edges, so I kind of liked having some of the straighter, more rectilinear shapes. Like looking at this work of art, how it has repetition and randomness. It has larger shapes, it has smaller shapes. This follows so many of the rules of contrast and basic design that to me it's very interesting to look at. And it also has a lot of depth. I mean, to me it's quite realistic because it does have the variety of contrast that naturalistic imagery has. I look at glazes on pottery. A lot of people who would never dream of looking at or appreciating abstract art or gesture painting, they will appreciate those qualities in watercolor. They'll look at the abstract glazes on pottery, and it's very beautiful, and they can appreciate it there. I think that this type of art got off to a bad start because, well, people thought it was cheating or a bucket of paint thrown in public's face, or however they thought. So it's really too bad that people have locked themselves off from being able to appreciate it. But you as a commercial artist really need to understand this way of thinking in the abstract and to apply that back into your painting. See, I mean, look how much more interesting that is. I mean, how long would it take me to get that level of coolness in here? I could sit here for weeks. But there's sometimes you can look at abstract art and see some of the things that they're doing in the layering, and try to bring that into your own work. There's these lines over the top um, and then erasing some of them out, to get the interaction, the complexity. So anyway, you get the idea of what I'm trying to say, and the idea of exaggerating differences is really central to art. Think of exaggerating a pose, making the weight on one leg seem a little heavier. Look at a line underneath the foot that's carrying most of the weight. And exaggerating atmospheric perspective. You don't draw, say for instance, if you're drawing a head in 3/4, this eye is done with more contrast and more detail, and the back eye is done with less. It's really exaggerating atmospheric perspective. If you have one leg that's coming forward, the leg that's behind is done with less contrast, and this leg comes forward. So, is there really 5 miles between this knee and that knee? No, there isn't, but you're exaggerating these differences of forward and backward. You're exaggerating atmospheric perspective because the eye understands those depth cues. So always be on the lookout for ways that you can play up differences that way. Now, this is related to another idea that I want to talk about, and that is, I mentioned at my demo, is I used to listen to music a lot when I painted. I'm finding that I can't really do that, or it has a bad effect on my ability to concentrate. Probably the one thing that you should stay away from, and if you ever see yourself doing, is something oil painters called licking. And that is, okay, we've got a head here and I'm painting it, and I've got the music on, I'm comfortable in my chair, and I'm just kind of zoned out painting this stuff, just licking it, and in essence just just mindlessly filling up areas, blah 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 going on. You'll see in the demo that I'm always changing brushes, I'm always changing colors. I'm really trying to think about what I'm doing as much as I can. When you're listening to music, it becomes like hypnosis, to where you're not really fully mentally committed and aware of what you're doing. I think there should be, I know when I work at greatly different speeds. It's another aspect of differences that I play up. Sometimes I work very quickly and see where I'm going with it, and then I see where I am, and then I work very slowly and very deliberately to get some shapes back into it. I mean, as precise as I can. So I'm not working at one speed. I'm not working only at detail or with one brush. Working with as many different variations as I can, both with the tool and as I say, even the pace at which I work. I think some people might say, yeah, but when I'm listening to music, I kind of get into a flow, and it just kind of flows out, and you get into a rhythm with it. And yeah, I guess that can be true. But when you get yourself into that zone, you're probably not. Your work probably will start to repeat itself a bit because you're always kind of in that zone. So just try. Feel free to disregard this advice. This is really just my own opinion on it. But, well, probably repeating myself ad nauseum, but that's the best way to make a point sometime. Think about what you're doing. Work fast, work slow. Think about the differences in your subject that you can entertain the viewer with, because in the end, that's what you are, is a visual entertainer. The more information and the bigger story that you can tell about the object and scene that you're painting, the more interest it will have for the viewer. So those are my thoughts on contrast.